I have a dust problem. But this'll fix it. I love my thicknesser. It's the ultimate tool in the reclaimed materials tool belt. It lets me turn any scrap wood I can salvage from anything into raw, beautiful timber that I can turn into anything else. But this sawdust apocalypse is pretty much prohibitive every time I want to use it. Now, I do have a dust collector, but it's not designed to take sawdust. It's just literally designed to take dust particles. As you can see here, the grill is specifically designed to stop sawdust so that it doesn't clog up the fan. But there is a way, and that's using something called a cyclone, which separates fine dust particles from large sawdust. And we're going to 3D print one in this video. Over in the workshop, I started making a frame. This is a piece of particle board that I bought to make a sled for my thicknesser. With projects at the moment, I'm trying to stick as much as I can to materials I already have available in the workshop. So I'm going to build this whole frame out of what's left over of this particle board. Maybe a couple of scrap pieces from my collection. Speaking of scrap pieces, here's some pallet wood I'm milling down. I'm going to turn these into the corner braces to attach the mid panel to the bottom. I cut some simple 45s in the ends of the braces, and they're ready to fit up to the frame. I'm tack nailing everything in place with the brad nailer, and then driving screws for strength. Putting the whole thing on wheels so it's easy to move around the workshop. And a little bit of trimming goes a long way in making this look a little less janky. I'm removing the wheels from the dust collector so that I can use the bolt holes as mounting points. I'm using M8 galvanized bolts mostly because they were cheap and available. And the whole thing was already pretty heavy. Even with my faith in that wobble test, I decided I needed a few more braces on the frame, so I milled down some more scrap wood. I'm trying to use pieces that I don't really care too much about, and these are offcuts from some much larger boards that I have in my workshop. I drove a single screw in at each end of each brace and then came back later and drove a second screw in to keep the position. This actually added a surprising amount of stiffness. Again, as I'm mostly working within the limits of this particle board, one side of my platform was shorter than the other. So I needed to add more depth to my platform for the collection bin. While I'd been working on the frame, things had been 3D printing. This is the replacement shroud for the thicknesser. Instead of gluing, I decided to use plastic welding, which in this case I'm basically just using a soldering iron to melt the two pieces together. This is because the part was too big to print in one piece on the printers I have available. For larger gaps, you can use pieces of the same filament that the print is made out of to gap fill, and again, it pretty much acts like welding. On test fit, I did discover it wasn't sitting quite right. I'd made it too narrow, so I had to print some extensions, which I added off camera, again via plastic welding. And here we have the first part of the Cyclone, the top part, coming off the 3D printer. I ran out of the ABS that I was trying to get rid of, so the top white part is actually ASA. The seam between the two plastics was weak and split pretty quickly, so I had to plastic weld the whole way along it. Here's the bottom part of the Cyclone, and it's going to mount to the bin top. A really easy way to make a clean-ish hole in plastic is just to heat it up enough that the plastic becomes soft. and then you can just cut through it with a good craft knife. I quickly discovered that I'd cut the hole too big for the mounting screws though, so I just laser cut a wooden gasket and glued it into place with hot glue. This will give the mounting screws something to grab onto. A little more hot glue to hold everything in position. And the ever important hot glue filler gasket. And we're driving screws. You'll probably notice these black cone-shaped objects. They're actually adapters. I'm using a 100mm hose, and the Cyclone was designed for 60mm hose, so I needed to adapt the size. They're a TPU cone for strain relief, and then solid ASA flanges. I needed to cut the hose into 2 pieces so I could connect the 2 components of the dust collection system. I mounted a strip of self-adhesive foam underneath the lid to help make a gasket. It's time to fit everything up, and cable ties are our friend here. I do hate cable tie ends sticking out though, so I was quick to clip those off. These solid sections of the adapters provide a good surface for the cable ties to clamp onto and a better seal with the hose. And so we'd arrived at version 1. I used some old pieces of ratchet strap and just screwed them into the frame to hold the bin and the bag in place when it's in use. I was so ready by this point to have this done and get the first test going. And much to my excitement, it seemed to be working pretty well. I don't yet know where the sawdust is, but it certainly wasn't coming out all over the wood. Yes, there's a little bit of escapement here, but I wasn't expecting it to be perfect. A quick look inside the shroud afterwards showed it was empty, which is a good sign. And there was sawdust in the bucket. We were on a roll. The last thing to check was the inlet for the fan to make sure it hadn't just got all jammed up, but there was nothing there. Everything had worked perfectly. Before I did any more in-depth testing and called this project done, I wanted to do something about how janky it was looking. In its current configuration, it looks like it takes up a lot of space in the workshop, being made from so many different looking parts. So I figured a good coat of paint was in order. Okay, so in a minute, we're going to put this thing through its paces. But before we do, I just want to mention 2 things. First, if you've enjoyed this, please like this video and hit subscribe. Second, if you really like this video, then consider heading over to my Patreon, patreon.com/refitretro, and signing up for $5 a month. Over there, you'll get behind the scenes content and sneak peeks at future projects. Okay, now let's see what this thing can really do. Okay, so it's not perfect, but at least it kind of looks like it belongs together now. I had to cut some boards down to go through the thicknesser, so I decided to try the dust collection on the miter saw, but it didn't work. This is going to require a different solution. I'm including this scene so that you realize the dust covering the collector in the following scenes is from the miter saw and not from failed thicknesser collection. I am pleased to report, however, that on the thicknesser, this worked absolutely perfectly. Board after board, plane after plane, it ate the sawdust. Yes, like I said, there is still a little bit of escapement, but if you think that's a problem, perhaps we should have another look at what it looked like before. And taking a look in the collection bin afterwards revealed the truth we already knew. This thing absolutely cranks. Well, there we go. I think my dust problem is solved for now, although the miter saw is definitely still an issue, but we'll tackle that in a future video. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you had some fun. Maybe you even learned something. If you're interested in building one of these for yourself, I will have links to all the files down below. But that's it. We're done. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.